Welcome to 10-Minute University Noontime Chat. I'm Priscilla Robinson, and today I'll be sharing some information and hopefully inspiration to create raised garden beds. For those of you who are not familiar with the 10-Minute University trademark, it includes short classes, videos, and handouts on essential gardening information for you, the home gardener. Oregon State University owns the trademark, and Clackamas County Master Gardeners develop and manage the program. Today's class is the 10th in a series of 21 webinars. With the help of these webinars, we hope to help you master your garden. For the complete lineup, please visit the Master Gardeners website at www.cmastergardeners.org. Let's get started. I'll focus on examining a landscape technique that has been utilized for centuries. Raised garden beds. Please explore the many resources of 10-Minute University, including videos and over 50 handouts. I've listed 8 handouts from the 10-Minute University library that I feel will give you an excellent research-based information to help you plan, build, plant, and maintain a gorgeous garden. Today, Laura Iyer will be co-hosting and facilitate the question and answer session following this presentation. Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation. We will be monitoring both the Q&A box and the chat box and post pertinent links. The resources at the OSU Extension Services is wonderful. Here are a few publications you may find helpful. Growing Your Own is one of my go-to publications. I highly recommend you take a look at it. If you're going to plant vegetables, take a look at that table for planting vegetables. It's thorough with its varieties and planting guides. Also, 2 videos listed here are proven winners when it comes to a DIY. And here are additional resources that you might want to explore in your pursuit of raised bed gardening. Today, we're going to cover the following topics: gain knowledge on what a raised garden bed is and its benefits, learn and interpret the criteria for building a raised bed on site, learn the steps to make an unframed raised bed, gain knowledge of materials and their safety, and learning some construction tips. Well, to begin with, raised bed gardens have soil higher than the surrounding native soil. They are usually small and surrounded by walkways. They are connected to the native soil. That means the ground in your yard. And it offers alternatives for yards that have challenging locations. Raised beds are versatile and can be planted with vegetables, flowers, berries, or even shrubs. What is your vision? Hopefully, you'll see something today to help you get started. When I'm gardening, I enjoy the journey. I expect to hit a few bumps or even some detours along the road, but I feel that it's the process of gardening that really gives me great gratification. Raised beds provide a blank canvas. In these 2 photos, you can see the raised beds connect to the native soil. They have a good quality growing media that includes native soil, compost, amended soil products. The soil conditions surrounding your home may not possess the desirable characteristics for growing flowers and produce. For centuries, in many parts of the world, modified soils are elevated to optimize the growing conditions. Raised beds are not a new concept. but they are gaining popularity, certainly here in the United States. Raised beds offer an opportunity to plan and build your dream garden. By carefully constructing the raised beds, you can plant with greater confidence because the needs of those plants are being met now. Raised beds, either framed or unframed, may be the best option for success in your yard. Raised beds have many, many benefits. They provide better drainage, warmer soil, they extend the growing season, and ultimately you can have larger harvests. Better drainage keeps the roots of your plant healthy. It allows for the water and the nutrients dissolved in that water to flow freely and to be absorbed and used by the plant for growth, for flowers, for vegetables. Warmer soil means extending your growing season earlier in spring and later into the autumn. That sounds good. Lastly, with a better growing environment, you will enjoy larger harvests. The defined beds are easier to plan. They simplify movement in the planting area and help with maintenance and harvest. The defined beds make it easy to plan. And the photo on the right shows a planning guide that I got off of an app. It helps me with defined measurements in my raised beds, I know exactly how much space I have to grow the vegetables, and the app actually helps me plan how many plants I need for an area. So that's a real benefit. When establishing a new raised bed, planning and installing a watering system is worth doing at this point. My vegetable garden is at a community center. I can't install a permanent irrigation system. So in the photo on the right, you can see that I have installed 2 soaker hoses in each garden bed. And then I attach hoses to a dual watering timer. And then that timer gets connected to my water source. It's not fancy, but it serves the purpose for my raised bed. And I am following the rules set out in my community garden. Plan walkways at least 3 feet wide. Think about those beds filled with vibrant and healthy plants. They will spill over. Plants don't understand boundaries. They will encroach on the walkways. If your walkway is too narrow, it may be more of an obstacle course once those plants get going. Another benefit of the walkway is it reduces compaction. Compaction is a soil condition when the soil components are pushed together and there isn't enough air and space. Those gaps, those air gaps are very important in soil. So a walkway tells you where to walk, and it also tells your guests and your helpers where to walk. Here, my raised beds are easily outfitted with row covers. This promotes warmer soil and protection for young plants. It's always a treat when I get to peek under the row cover and see what's been growing. The smooth ledges on these raised beds provide a place to sit and tend to the flowers as well as the weeds. It's really nice to have your raised beds up at least 20 inches. It's convenient and it's easier on the back. And believe it or not, these vegetables all came from my 2 little raised beds. It's the ultimate benefit for me, harvesting fresh vegetables to share with my friends, my family, and my community. I also like to experiment with unusual varieties that aren't accessible in the market or expensive at the farmer's market. So I like to try different vegetables and share them with people. So here are some real basics to raised bed gardening. You really want to think about your location, the orientation, the type of raised bed, your plan for attachments or supports, or cold frames. You want to plan the size and the height of the bed based on the site and the needs of the gardener. Keep building and planting materials safe. After all, you may be growing vegetables. You don't want to have chemicals leaching into your soil. So make sure your materials are safe. And lastly, what materials will you use on your walkways? Those walkways are really wonderful, especially in the winter when it's soggy. Having a material on top of that helps you out. All right, location, location, location. Select a location with 8 hours or more of full sun. Think about what casts shadows in your yard. Stay away from those shady spots. Lay out a garden with an east-west orientation. And as you are planting your vegetables and flowers, think about what is the mature size of that plant. You want to plant the tallest plants on the north side and the shortest plants on the south side. It'll be sort of a tiered effect, and everyone will get a nice dose of sunshine. Here's the practical layout, what I was just talking about. You can see the east, south, and west side of my garden bed. I've done my best to plant the tallest plants over here on the north side. Your budget, your garden location, and your skill set will help you decide which kind of raised bed you will build. Will it be an unframed bed or a framed bed? Size specific for vegetables. Some raised beds are designed like this one with a hinge that lets you open it up to uncover the great rewards, like a potato. Another part of my gardening really involves sharing that experience with my family. And there's nothing more fun than digging potatoes with your grandchildren. Another important aspect of planning is attachments. In this particular bed, those metal poles are providing structure for the berry bushes that are growing up into the middle of this uh, raised bed. There is seating along the edge, so the sides are a little bit wider so that you can sit down and enjoy your garden. Another thing that you may want to grow is, or grow, sorry, build is a cold frame. And a cold frame helps when it's like a little mini greenhouse, and it allows you to get your plants out into the sunlight. And this is the cold frame, and this will move up and down depending on the temperature in that little cold frame. There are lots more attachments. These poor rose bushes were just absolutely devoured by the deer. And so this gardener built a little cage to protect the bushes. Remember, when you are attaching your attachments to your frame, be sure to bolt them in so they're secure. Also consider how far the gardener can reach. These beds are only accessible from one side. Therefore, the maximum width of these should be about 2 feet wide. These terraced garden beds allow you to grow on a slope without fearing erosion from wind and rain on that slope. So the raised beds allow you to use a part of your property that was perhaps not a candidate without the raised beds. How many people have about 8 feet sitting at the back of their garage, seeming just collecting junk? Well, at my daughter's house, she really wanted to have a garden. So she and her husband engineered these raised beds and propped them up about 4 feet high so that the sun could that they could access the sun because they've got building and fences that were shading the area if it was down at ground level. Once they got these grazed beds made, then they discovered that they were feeding the squirrels more than their family. So they came up with these cute little attachments to protect against the furry critters, not the cute critter in the picture. So there are a lot of different materials that you can use for raised beds. Rocks are safe, and see how these rocks have been built into a terrace onto that the sloping property, and it actually creates a nice little terraced area. It looks really natural coming out of the hillside. Concrete blocks are also safe. Poured concrete and culverts are safe, provide a nice growing environment. Is treated wood safe? There are all sorts of treatments that that wood is treated with. Try and get some information about what it is. When it comes to repurposing wood or buying wood, just be cautious, be informed. You don't want dangerous chemicals leaching into your soil. One solution is using a 6 mil plastic liner. It's a good and immediate solution to create a barrier. Have the plastic make contact with the wood, and don't put it on the bottom of the bed or you'll have a soggy garden bed. So just put the barrier up against the wood. Walkways, as I said earlier, should be a minimum of 36 inches wide if possible. This is for winter or wet weather. You'll want to use ground bark, sand or gravel, rocks and brick. Even cardboard and newspaper can be a good material to put down in your walkways. And sawdust, leaves, and yard debris can all be pushed down into the walkway. And just as an added bonus, when you think about putting brick or stone as a walkway, those retain heat and they will actually extend your season. They will absorb the heat during the day and keep the area near your garden beds nice and warm. So some of you may have an area in your yard that looks like this: weeds, leaves, not being used for much. Well, why not think about you using that property and use these steps for a simple raised bed. The first step would be to mark out the perimeter, remove persistent weeds and large rocks, turn or fork the area at least 6 inches deep, mix in 3 inches or more of organic matter, mark the beds and the walkways with stakes placed at the corners, dig out the walkways and put that soil on top. Smooth it, and then you're ready to get growing. Here's what I was just describing. First, you're going to select your area for your garden. You're going to work that soil at least 6 inches deep. Think about how deep your roots are going to go. If you're planning on growing tomatoes, evidently those roots go at least 3 to 4 feet deep. So you're going to need to prepare that native soil. Then you're going to add a layer of compost material and a fertilizer rich in nitrogen, such as blood or feather meal. Mix that organic material with the native soil. At this point, you could add another layer of native soil, perhaps the soil dug out from the walkway areas. Another layer of compost and nitrogen, work that into the soil. Lastly, you're going to shape your beds. You'll want sort of a 45-degree angle at the edge of your beds, and then you're going to want to smooth the top. This two-step method of digging saves both your back and your spirit. What you want to think about before you start to dig up your soil is it ready to be worked? And I like to do the squeeze test. And that squeeze test means just grabbing a handful of that soil. If it is really drippy with water and it really clumps together like clay, then you are not ready to work that soil. It is too early and you will damage the structure of that soil. So do your squeeze test. If the soil is ready to work, go in and dig down about 3 inches. Do the whole bed at 3 inches. Take a rest. Then come back and dig down another 3 inches, 6 inches by breaking through that top layer. And then it gives you that opportunity to go even deeper. Once that soil has been turned, you're going to add your organic material. Then you're going to turn that in as we described earlier. The photo on the left shows that the right side has that organic material worked into that clay soil. You can see it's already starting to get rich and ready for plants. Then add your walkway soil on top of that, and you can add a bit more organic material, work that in. This was my absolute first attempt at creating a simple raised bed. Not bad. It doesn't have to be glamorous, it just must be functional. By providing well-draining soil, rich compost, and the microorganisms from that native soil, it made the raised bed ready for planting and a successful year of growing. So we're not going to do a step-by-step on how to build a, uh, a framed raised bed, but this is the most critical factor that you need to remember. You must put blocking in the corner. The photo on the right shows a properly constructed interior portion of that raised bed. The photo on the left shows what happens if you do not put blocking in the corners. Eventually, the weight of that soil pushes and forces the boards out, and you're left with a raised bed that leaks, is unsightly. So use screws and blocking in the corners, and you're gonna be happy with your product. More construction tips. It's really important that you have gaps between blocks. If you're using blocks or rocks, you're not going to want to cement that in perfectly. You want to leave some gaps and make sure that there are holes that will drain freely. Raised beds do best with a combination of native soil, amended soil products, and compost. Healthy soil has a delicate balance of components. And if you take a look at this pie chart, air and water are essentially space, gaps. Then there is 45% mineral particles, and then just 5% organic matter. So it's really important that you think about this formula when you are getting your raised bed set up. You want to have nice, light, fluffy soil so that it can, so that there is those gaps, that space for air and for water. The mineral particles will help to bond this together. And that's why it's really important not to work your soil too early in the season. If you compact those minerals, They're going to want to stick together instead of being um, distributed evenly with the other organic material. So just think about this. And there was a great webinar earlier in the season that's available for you to watch on soils and specifically working with our soils here in the Pacific Northwest. So if this is an area that you want to dive into, check out that webinar. All right, so I am going to share a video. It's a short video that my friend and colleague, Sherry Sheng, developed and produced. This is just one of the many videos that is available at the 10-Minute University. And fingers crossed, I've got this set up properly. You'll be able to have a nice overview of raised beds, how to build them, how to plant in them, and this video goes into a little bit more detail about framed beds. So fingers crossed.
Making a functional and productive raised bed requires basic know-how that is well researched. This segment will review Oregon State University recommendations and show you how to make one with or without a frame. Keep these things in mind. Choose a spot with sufficient sunlight for what you want to grow. To minimize shading, put tall plants on the north side of the bed and shorter ones on the south side. Know that a raised bed does not need frames. It can be made by simply mounting soil. For a framed bed, use the material that suits your budget, space, building skill, and needs. Allow enough distance between beds for a wheelbarrow. Keep the bed no wider than you can reach with ease. Have a plan for filling the bed and make plans for watering. To make a bed without frame, follow these steps. Mark the area for the bed and path. Remove weeds. Loosen soil in the bed with a rototiller or spading fork. Add 2 to 4 inches of compost and mix into the soil. Remove the top 6 inches of soil from designated pathways and mix into the bed. You may add purchased soil mix to build up the bed, but keep it no higher than 8 inches. And finally, level the top and shape the borders to a 45-degree slope. If you choose, fill the path with wood chips or other materials to suppress weeds. High beds like these are easier on the back. These are 20 inches high by stacking 2x8 treated lumber on top of 2x12 boards. Beds are 3 feet wide with a 3 feet path between them. Our native clay is rich in nutrients, so it should be incorporated into the bed. Before putting up the frame, loosen the soil in the bed with either a spading fork or rototiller. The deeper, the better. Excavate the top 6 inches of the path and add the soil to the bed. To increase organic content, add 2 to 4 inches of compost and mix well. To fill a high bed like this, you may need additional native soil from somewhere else in your garden, compost, or purchased soil mix. Add them in small batches and mix thoroughly with each addition. A high bed requires special reinforcement. The solution here is galvanized pipes bolted into opposite walls. Notice these helpful features. These PVC pipes become handy support structures for beans, peas, and cucumber. These PVC pipes can anchor other pipes and turn the bed into a hoop house. Soaker hoses water these beds. Lower beds like these require less material and time to build. These beds are framed with 2x8 treated wood reinforced in the corner with a 4x4 blocking post. An ingenious design feature is the bed size. Each bed is 40 inches wide and 30 feet long, so the growing area is exactly 100 square feet. This makes calculations for soil amendments such as lime and fertilizers easy. These PVC pipes at each corner of the bed protect plants from errant hoses. A timer-operated drip system delivers water to plants as scheduled. Look at the marvelous yet simple setup. Intake pipe, timer, filter, pressure reducer, and feeder lines to each bed.
So now that we've gone through in detail, you saw a great little video from Sherry. What are you going to do? You're going to start planning and you're going to make science-based decisions, research-based decisions. You're going to think about your location on your property, the bed orientation, east-west, the size and the depth, how to fit it to your site. You're going to account for walkways, a watering assist system, and attachments. Plan steps for the construction. Ponder what you want to grow. Decide on a framed or unframed raised bed. Decide on the materials for the garden beds and the walkways. But remember, determine if your soil is workable. If not, wait. You can still do a lot of planning and gathering of materials, but don't put that shovel or fork into the ground until the ground is ready. Measure and mark the walkways in garden for the garden beds. Stake out the boundaries. Loosen soil to remove the rocks, weeds, and sod. Remove at least 6 inches of the native soil from the walkways, set it aside and save it to put back on the raised bed. Add organic matter, work that into your soil. Gradually add amended soil products and native soil until you have reached the desired soil level. We haven't really talked about this, but it's also important to test the pH of your soil. So once you have done all of this, you can either get a kit from the garden center or take it to a commercial place for testing. Certain plants want certain pHs. It's how they efficiently absorb the water-soluble nutrients. So it's an important step as well. Now all you have to do is get growing. And the possibilities are waiting. Many thanks for joining us at 10-Minute University. We will now move into the live question and answer session. Let's go ahead and welcome Laura. And how are you doing today, Laura?
You have some really great questions that came up.
Oh, good. I'll do my best.
So if you have a high raised beds, do they have to reach the native soil? Say the depth of your bed was 3 feet, and I'm just making a guess here. But you're not going to be able to dig down into that native soil. Does that make sense?
So it does need to have some contact with that native soil at the bottom, and it's always a good idea to loosen that native soil and then grow and then build up your raised bed. When you loosen the soil, it just allows for pure, good drainage. Does that answer that question?
We'll see.
Okay.
Is the soil warmer in a bed but colder in the side in a pot? Or is it just the size of the area of the container, whether it's a raised bed or a pot?
That's a really good question. There are definitely materials that will absorb that solar energy and be retained in that material and then permeate into the soil of the pot or the container. So we had the example of the cinder block container. That is that's going to act as a conductor of heat versus wood can be more of an insulator of the heat. So the material does make a difference. And I think that goes along with potted plants too. And the color of that container or the size of the raised bed will also determine how much of that solar energy is being absorbed and transferred.
Several people have asked, what is that app that you referred to when you were doing your planting plan?
Aha. So if you go online, there are quite a few seed catalogs that offer that app as a planning system. So I am going to have to get back to you folks with the specifics of the name of that app. Sorry, I can't put my tongue on the specific one, but
Okay.
it's really helpful because they know their seeds, they know their products, and how much space that the mature plant is going to need. And
so if they have a seed catalog, they would probably be able to find the app name in the catalog.
Yeah, if they have a seed catalog, go to the online store and see. The bigger seed catalogs are going to have that app.
Okay. Where can one purchase row covers? Where do you have to go? Where do you get to go?
I get my row covers from a small garden center here in the Willamette Valley. They are also available online at different garden subjects. And Laura, do you remember the name of that fabric? The fabric is wonderful. It's permeable. So when it rains, the water will still go into your garden bed. It's not like it's permeable. Do you know the name of that material?
I don't.
Okay.
It's different
I
than
know that
landscape material. It's different than landscape cloth, though, right?
it is. Yeah. If you Google row covers, then you should come up with the name of that. You should come up with the name of that material.
Okay. Can you talk a bit more about the cold frame? I couldn't tell dimensions. Is there a specific width and height that is optimum for a cold frame?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, cold frames come in lots of different shapes. If you're building a cold frame, then ideally it is going to sit on top of the walls of your framed garden bed. So it's usually like maybe a 2x4 makes a nice frame. And then on top of it, you're going to have some sort of material. In that one, it was sort of a plastic material. You can also use glass. I know that you can take actually an old window from a house, and you can use that as your guide for your size, and then build a frame out of 2x4s, and then use a hinge. It's very important that it's going to be, think about it. You're planting your little starts. So those little start pots are usually about 3 or 4 inches tall. So you're going to want it to be at least 3 or 4 inches tall. If it's sitting on top of your raised bed, that's going to give you some more space between the soil. So I think a 2x4 frame is going to do you well. Set
Okay.
up this way, not flat.
The co-host said that the material is called Rime.
Say that again.
Rime is the row cover
Okay.
material. Rime.
Okay.
Remay.
REMAY is what you're going to want. And they usually come in nice wide lengths, widths, usually 8 feet wide, and then you can get it as long as you want. So
Okay.
it worked really well on my garden beds because my garden beds are 8 feet wide. And then I put a metal bendable metal pole in there and then clip it on with document clips. You can also do what is called free flowing, where you can just actually just lay it on top and it kind of, goes in the breeze. I like it. It protects the plant from insects, from critters, and it warms up the soil.
Okay, thanks. So remember when you were talking about treated wood?
Yeah.
This question is, my raised bed was made with treated wood. What can I do to prevent chemicals from leaching into my plants?
Well, the quick and easy solution is to get a nice 6 mil plastic sheeting and then attach that going up the sides of the wood and then over the top. Do not put it down on the bottom. That creates a barrier between the soil and the wood, and it'll keep the chemicals from leaching in.
Okay, thanks. I have a raised bed that is 30 inches off the ground on legs. Would you talk more about whether you should line the raised bed with some kind of cloth, visqueen, or cardboard?
Well, it's technically a container versus a true raised bed, but if you decide that you want to line it, I'm wondering if this is a flat surface or if it's pitched. Some of those are popular. Whatever it is, at the lowest point, you're going to need to have drainage holes. So lining it with the 6 mil plastic will give you a barrier and keep it protected. But remember, you have to allow it to drain. Do not line the entire thing with the plastic. Did that answer their question? What was the second part of that question?
If you should line the raised bed with some kind of cloth, visqueen, or cardboard. So I think you answered the question.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use cardboard. You could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One season.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't.
This is a kind of a sad question. My garden is covered entirely by plastic mesh. Should I put raised bed on top or cut through the mesh and toss it?
Wow, I'm having a hard time visualizing that. Um,
So maybe she inherited a garden where they put down a plastic weed barrier. That's what I'm guessing.
yeah.
Oh.
You know what? I would definitely put raised beds out in that area, and I would just go through the process, and the preparation would be removing that mesh and then getting to your native soil, because let's remember that native soil, not only is it providing the nutrients and the minerals, but it also has a lot of living organisms that are essential. So you want to allow those organisms to be released. And so, yeah, you're going to want to cut through that. Um,
And
you know, just take it off as little steps.
little,
Start one bed at a time. Don't tackle the whole project if possible. Just take it a step at a time so that you can have fun with it.
so this is something that she thought. Also, I figure it might be best to just remove the mesh from where I plant, leaving it on the fallow part of the garden.
Yeah, the area that is most important to uncover is where you're going to be growing your vegetables or fruit or flowers.
Mhm.
And you'll also want to clear that off in the walkways. You'll want to get that soil from the walkway area into your raised bed,
Yeah.
incorporate it in, and then put something down as a barrier.
Can you talk about the best ways to fold in native soil with compost?
Sure. Everyone has their favorite tools. There are lots of them out there. Rototilling actually is not my favorite tool, even though it perhaps has a little bit more brawn. It can really overdo it. And if you're not experienced, I would stay away from a rototiller. What you do want to get is a nice fork, like you might have seen in the video. Those forks are very efficient wedges going in. And what I do is I go down and then I just push forward. I know you see pictures of people digging up and turning it over. And actually that's kind of overkill. So you want to get in, loosen, and then just work your way in. And then that's opening up those essential spaces. And then your compost will go on top of that. And then you can just work it in.
You can rock back and forth.
Rock back and forth. Yeah. And
Yeah.
but it just takes some time and take some breaks
Mhm.
and just work a little area at a time, what you're comfortable with.
Do you know where people can buy those great culvert pieces? Think of moving them. Wow.
I know. I don't know, but I do know the people. Remember those big culverts that were in this video? That is at the Milwaukee Center, which is right here in the Willamette Valley. So I know those people. Maybe they know where they came from, and we can add that link at a later time.
A question came in. Are metal troughs okay to use for a raised bed or a container, maybe?
Water
Like if you had a
troughs?
horse trough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This would be the perfect scenario for a raised bed. Let's say you had a water trough and the bottom was rusting out. If you could knock that base out, prepare your soil, place the trough on top, use some, incorporate some of that native soil, then that would be a raised bed. But you can buy them at feed stores. If it has the base in it, then it's technically not a raised bed. It's more of a container garden, which is just fine. And whatever you do with water troughs, make sure that you have a hole drilled into the side so that you get good movement of
Drain.
the drainage. Yeah, good drainage. Even if it was connected to the native soil, you've got the whole, I would still probably drill a few holes at the bottom of that so
Yeah.
that you make sure you get good drainage.
Right. I have 4x4 cedar boxes. Do I need to remove the grass in my yard before filling the boxes with raised bed soil? Do I need to put rocks or straw down between the grass and soil?
Those sound like great garden beds,
Yeah,
4x4s. You're going to get a lot of good things planted in there. It's very important to give your vegetables, your flowers, as many resources as possible. So getting rid of grass surrounding is just going to allow more water and resources to go to your garden beds. It's probably not essential unless it is hard to keep down. One thing that you can do is sheet mulch around your garden beds. Maybe you saw that in my presentation, my little garden beds. I put down layers of cardboard and burlap bags, and that helps to keep down the grasses that want to come up. And maybe you just create a 3-foot boundary around those garden beds.
Yeah. Okay. This is a good general question. What are some tips for raised bed soil maintenance and general maintenance of a raised bed?
Aha, it is a good question. And it's something that's always on people's minds. So if you have an established raised bed and you've got soil in there, you want to add amendments to that soil so that it continues to be rich in the nutrients that the plants want. So in the fall, you can add a layer of manure and then work that in. You can also put in some high nitrogen fertilizers. You can use feather meal or blood meal. Blood meal is a little higher in nitrogen and it releases very slowly. So that's one thing you can do. If you find your soil starting to get compacted, you definitely do not want to add more heavy elements to that soil because that's just going to continue that. Get in there with your fork and do that rocking motion going in and rocking and trying to keep it light and fluffy.
Okay. Anytime when add compost is mentioned, it looks like compost has decomposed to a smooth consistency. Is that purchased compost from a store?
Probably in those photos it is. But compost, you can get your own compost actually getting to a nice consistent texture by building a screen. I have a 1-inch by 1-inch grid screen and I place it on top of and it's in a frame, 2x4 frame. And then I put the compost into that. And then I just use my rake or my shovel to kind of push it through, or depending on how heavy it is, I actually pick it up and shake it. And it acts, like any other screen or a colander, and you'll get a nice texture.
Yeah. Okay. I can't afford cedar, don't want to use pressurized lumber, and the synthetic raised bed kits I've been using are no longer available. Can you recommend a 4x4 raised bed kit that's not too expensive? Or what could you use besides cedar?
Okay. Redwood is another. I'm just reading. What about concrete blocks? If you want it to be wood, then concrete blocks, bricks are all good things that could be used. I honestly have not been out in the market and into the garden centers too much with what's been going on with COVID. The big box stores do offer raised beds for a very short, limited time. So that might be an option, or decking material. I wonder if you can find someone who's taking a deck apart and repurpose that wood. That would be ideal, wouldn't it? Nice long boards.
Yeah, yeah. You put the painted side out.
Yes.
If they had stained it.
Yes.
I recently bought a house with established beds, and I'm assuming she means established raised beds. What can I do to prep these beds? Is it too late in the season?
Definitely not. No. I grow in my raised beds year round. So, it's always an opportunity. Um, so at this point, I'd want to go in with my fork, loosen up that soil, perhaps top dress it with a little bit of compost or a good quality amended soil product. They actually do make raised bed soil. So,
Mhm.
and then I would definitely put in, maybe get a soil test.
Mm.
That might be another good point, since you really don't know what's gone in there in the past. And you take soil from different locations in your garden bed, from the far side, the middle, and then the other side, and then take that to, and then you can mix it all together, because you're going to be dressing the entire garden bed. But I would suggest getting a soil test, loosening the soil, top dressing it with some compost, and get planning on what you want to plant. Not too late.
So I think this is a follow-up question that you answered. After a year or two, what do you do to freshen the soil in your box? And I think you answered that very well.
Okay.
Here's a kind of a companion question to that.
Okay, and I think this will have to be just about our last question,
Okay.
unless there's absolute burning question. Been a good
After
session.
she has grown tomatoes in the same bed for 2 years, can she get one more year out of it?
No,
Mhm.
no. It's very important to rotate crops. Any of the nightshade vegetables, potatoes, eggplant, tomatoes, all of those will eventually, if you keep planting them in the same place, will succumb to diseases. And so therefore it is very, very important to rotate your crops. And some crops are better at putting nutrients back into the soil, like peas. And so, I would move them if at all possible. I did talk to a friend who is growing tomatoes, and if you absolutely have to grow them in the same place, then she recommends removing the top 6 inches of soil and putting that somewhere else, and then top dressing, loosening that soil, getting new soil on top to prevent that spread of disease.
Okay.
And if you like tomatoes, we have another great session on tomatoes coming up in a couple of weeks.
One of the listeners wrote in that Territorial Seeds has a garden planner that has a link in the menu at the top of the website for that app that people were asking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
That app is really fun to play with, and by printing something out like that, you remember where you had different plants last season, and it helps you to get into what is called a 4-season rotation. You want to rotate your crops every year, and then after the 4th year, they're back in the
Yeah,
beginning position.
that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if we did not get your question answered, you can go to www.metromastergardeners.org, and they have master gardeners on duty to answer by the phone or by email. And at the end of this presentation, a questionnaire will be sent to you, and we would really appreciate if you answered it for us. It helps us to make our programs that much better. Please answer the question of the questionnaire. The video of this presentation will be available very shortly, within a day or two, and you can get that video from Clackamas County Master Gardeners. And then check the video. It has handouts on one side, video on the other. Go down the video and you will find it under 10-minute videos. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for coming to our wonderful presentation on raised beds.
Thank you, Laura. You're an awesome co-host. And I'm just going to throw this out that if you like slugs and snails, there is an awesome webinar coming up tomorrow, same time, same place. Sign up for it so you get your link. And, you know, I saw the preview. I love it. I love it, Laura.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Okay, and my photo today is from Napa, California. My son works up in the wine country and he sent this to me. So thank you, Drew, for this awesome background for today.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good one.